Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the Behavioral Corner. It's me, Steve Martirano, hanging on the corner. And you know how it works. We picked a great spot in virtual land, the Behavioral Corner, because so many people cross our paths as we hang out. We talk about behavioral health, which is a broad, vast topic. That's why I like to think of this podcast as a podcast about everything, because that's what affects our behavioral health. It's all made possible by our underwriting partners, Retreat Behavioral Health. You'll hear more about them a little bit later. So we are devoting this program to taking a look at domestic violence, October being designated annually as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's a shame we have to designate a month to this, but better that than nothing. And we have with us two people who I would do it an injustice to say that they're advocates for women across the board. I don't have enough time to tell you about the work that they do across the board, but certainly they have and are joining us because they have a particular interest in the topic of domestic violence. Christine Brunson is with us. Christine is a catalyst for changing societal norms and encouraging people to follow their dreams. Her mission is to empower people, particularly women. She is a case management coordinator at a societal service agency in Philadelphia, and she is the founder of Purple House Project PA. Christine, thanks for joining us. Also on board is Pat Albright. Pat describes herself as a low-income single mom, and she has a disability. She works with a couple of different groups that we're going to find out about, but essentially she works through an organization in Philadelphia called Crossroads Women's Center. Ladies, thanks for joining us on the Behavioral Corner. We appreciate that. Oh, I think we just lost Christine.
Hi.
Yeah, she'll be back. Hi, Pat.
Hi there.
There's Christine. Hi, Christine. Let's begin with you, Pat. Tell us about Crossroads.
Well, Crossroads Women's Center is a multiracial, community-based center where women come together across divisions for collective self-help support and advocacy against poverty, sexism, racism, disability, and other discrimination, and for financial recognition for unpaid caregiving that's overwhelmingly done by women. And all these issues related to domestic violence. And so we deal with a lot of different issues, but they're all interconnected.
Yeah. We're going to get very specifically into that because that is a key point about the discussion, I believe, of domestic violence. And that is that unlike, and I hate to use the term because it minimizes it, garden variety violence, which, we live in a violent society and in a world. Quite apart from that phenomenon, domestic violence, as Pat just described it, is impacted across an entire spectrum of things that overwhelmingly affect women. She just mentioned a few of those. Crossroads, I can just tell you this, and we'll leave the Crossroads website up, a link to it so you can see it. It is as rich a resource as you will find, informationally and services for these issues that affect women. So we can leave it at that. In addition, Pat has two organizations that we will deal with later: the Global Women's Strike and Give Us Back Our Children. That's going to be a key point a little bit later on. Christine, as I said, works with a social services agency in Philadelphia, but she's the founder of Purple House Project PA. Christine, what is Purple House?
Thank you so much for having me. Purple House Project is a community-based nonprofit organization with the mission to strengthen, empower, and transition women impacted by intimate partner violence through connection to essential resources that aid in the healing process I often tell people that we are the step after the shelter. So if someone is in imminent danger, we will refer them to a emergency shelter or emergency organization. However, we work with women who are transitioning, who needs help connecting to resources, or who need to feel empowered. So that's the purpose for this.
It's interesting you mentioned being part of a process, because too often I think we look at a situation like domestic violence and think it's handled in only one way, and you're done with it. Oh, you call the police and that's the end of the incident. But getting out from under situations like domestic violence is a ongoing process. It's a process. It's not a thing. I'm curious about the name, Christine. Why Purple House?
So purple is the color for domestic violence house, because we want all of the resources to be under one umbrella term, like one umbrella organization, because we feel like when people have to go here to access food resources and here to access mental health resources and another place to access another resource, things get lost in the sauce. So our thought is to be able to offer and connect people all under one roof. And then project, because it is a project, it's so many moving parts, and everybody's story looks a lot different.
No, I wasn't aware about the color designation. Can I begin? I sort of get the job of asking the really dumb and obvious questions, but that's what I do. So I will. Let me begin with you, Pat. As I said, violence is ubiquitous in our society, and we understand it. We understand carjacking and burglaries and, unfortunately, shootings and murders. When we add the descriptor domestic violence, what are we exactly talking about? There is a definition for domestic violence. What is it, Pat?
Basically, it's violence that has to do with and Christine will actually say more about the difference between intimate partner violence and domestic violence. But it's when you're we feel like it's oftentimes when you have a partner or a husband or a domestic partner or a husband who has then they often end up being abusive, and we think key to that is the fact that we're so often financially dependent on men in our relationships. So that's a lot of what our focus is. It's a situation where, especially that we think poverty is the biggest barrier to women being able to leave. So if you're in a domestic partnership and you're being abused, and you have to be able to have some kind of money and resources of your own to get out. We need financial independence in order to navigate these kind of situations.
Yeah, I think most people would be very surprised to find out how, in the grand scheme of things, relatively recent it is that women could have their own bank accounts or were independent financial actors, no matter what their marital or domestic status was. This is a relatively new phenomenon. And when you add to that other socioeconomic difficulties, you have a real burden to getting out from under these situations. Christine, what is the distinction between intimate partner and domestic violence?
Yeah, so domestic violence really deals with in the house, and so like Pat was mentioning, partners that are in the house, whereas intimate partner violence deals with the abuse that people can experience from a partner that doesn't live in the household. Say, for instance, you have a long-term boyfriend or girlfriend and their violence towards you that would categorize as intimate partner violence. Not necessarily that they live in the home with you, but so anyone you're intimate with. And intimate partner violence is all about power and control. So oftentimes people talk about toxic relationships, and those are bad too, very, very bad. But intimate partner violence and domestic violence deals with the unequal distribution of power and control, when one person has more control over the other one. And as you mentioned before, with the bank accounts and access to resources, that's when it becomes intimate partner violence.
Yeah. This is an overwhelmingly female problem, but there are, you don't view it exclusively as that, do you? There are situations
absolutely not. Yeah. There are definitely, and we are seeing more and more growing numbers of men, people identify as men, experiencing intimate partner violence. I think the stats now is 1 in 7 men experience intimate partner violence. And so the resources are definitely starting to shift, and people are starting to like realize that this isn't just a burden that impacts women, but also impacts men. And it's not just a burden that impacts heterosexual couples, but also members of the LGBTQ community as well.
Yeah, and it's an equal opportunity plague, that's for sure. Can I ask you to kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of when someone's in a situation like this, domestic violence, and confronts barriers to escape or change? Can you prioritize a couple of those? You begin with the economics. I certainly can see that, but what are a couple of other of the barriers that women confront when they're trying to get out of this situation? Pat, you want to start? Give us a couple.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we have dealt with, and it relates to the Give Us Back Our Children group that you mentioned that I work with, which was formed to address the fact that so many mothers are losing their children's custody of their children to the child welfare system, and that one of the reasons that children are taken unjustly, most of it is unjust, and that's due to racism, sexism, other discriminations if you have a disability, from being poor, or if you're in a domestic violence situation. And so it makes women very reluctant and afraid to try to do something about the domestic violence situation and report it anywhere, for fear that their children could be taken away, for being blamed for allowing the children to see this or whatever. And very frequently, which is devastating, children are taken and put in foster care, or they are given custody is given to the abusive father. And
really, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I understand. I think I understand the economic hardships that women would face in trying to get away from a violent or abusive situation. I didn't know that they risked losing their children. That would certainly be a barrier. Christine, what other factors come into play?
I would say another factor that comes into play is access to resources, affordable housing, access to mental health resources, access to food resources. If you think about it, a lot of times, right along with economic abuse, a lot of times people are in relationships, and when they decide to leave and get the strength to leave, a lot of their livelihood is connected to their partner, whether it be the access to health insurance, access to food, access to housing. And so oftentimes when people decide to leave, they have to start from scratch. And the shelters are over inundated in Philadelphia. More often than not, there are so many people who get turned away because in Philadelphia, there's only one domestic violence shelter. And it has 200 beds. And then in Delaware County, there's only one with under 20 beds. And so it's difficult. I would say children are also another barrier, because if you think about like school, I'm dealing with that now with one of the clients we face, like that we work with. They live in Delaware County. However, the only opening in a shelter was in Philadelphia. And so now they run the risk of having to transport their child from Delaware County to Philadelphia each day so that their child could stay in the school. And then transportation is often a barrier as well.
Yeah, that's. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it's shocking. Delaware County and Philadelphia, between them two shelters, we know the problem's much larger than that. You know, in the substance abuse world, sober living houses have grown exponentially over the past 20 years, and they're also part of that transition from treatment, then early sobriety, and then a place to live in a safe, sober environment as you make your way back into mainstream life. Purple House is not, strictly speaking, housing for people. It's just a service that helps them get to that point. Is that right?
Yeah, it's definitely not just housing for people. We actually don't have any housing right now. What we are linkage to resources. And we say house figuratively, like under this idea that all of the resources are housed under one roof. And so we refer.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the need for something like that. It would be wonderful if somebody could put together a string of actual homes where you could move.
The goal is transitional housing. Yeah, the goal is transitional housing.
Even in a temporary status, because as I understand, you've got a critical situation when someone's in danger. being
Yes.
threatened and abused. The first rule is get them out of that situation as quickly as you can. And then, of course, these other barriers we were talking about. To what extent are drugs and mental health issues that make this even more problematic? Pat, how big a role does mental illness play in domestic violence?
Well, that's hard for me to answer because I think it's so tied into the system that we're all trying to deal with, and how that if you're talking about the mental illness of the person who's doing the violence, when you think about the fact that how our lives and our contributions are not seen and valued as mothers and caregivers, and if you're on welfare, for example, they call you a welfare queen, and that they're forced to do work requirements as if raising a child is nothing. There's that whole mentality that I think that contributes to whatever quote unquote mental health is going on. That this is a societal thing that I think is at the root of it. That some lives are valued and some are not, and that goes. Yeah.
You've returned to that more than once, and it is interesting, and I sometimes wonder if it's not overlooked. The problems of overcoming domestic violence are systemic, and they deal with, as you said, very directly how society views women's role. They are the victims of this, but that notion of them as kind of a helpless victim, I don't think would be very helpful in one sense. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we've been interested in and have gone to a conference on is like the guaranteed income movement, and that when people have cash. They are provided cash and with no strings attached. People do very well in dealing with all kinds of situations. I mean, I don't know of one that's dealing with domestic violence per se. There's a program that's getting off the ground in DC for women in danger of having their children taken by child welfare. But the point is that that we're doing work. As mothers, and we're not considered workers in many circumstances, and we don't need to be lifted up by our bootstraps. We don't need a hand up or a handout or whatever they try to say, but we need to have our work recognized and supported. And this is work we're doing that we're entitled to money for. And so that's the kind of thing we're trying to shift that narrative, so that so it's not like we're helpless victims, but we're workers who are doing a critical role for society that are being ignored and not supported. And so that's kind of where we start. And we want to basically reshape society towards what it should be about, which is care of people and the planet. And we call it a care income.
Victim conjures up a certain image in people's minds of helplessness and weakness, in a sense. Oh, the victim. And that's quite distinct from, we know when coal miners organized, right? Or steel workers or auto workers, they were victimized by war, but they were a strong, potent force arguing for their position. They didn't look like victims. They looked like people who were saying enough is enough. Christine, let me ask you, and I don't think I know the answer. What has the ongoing, as a matter of fact, pandemic? What's been the impact on domestic violence through this pandemic?
We've seen numbers more than double since the pandemic, because especially when the stay-at-home orders were there. If you think about it, there were people who were forced to stay in the house with their partners all day, whereas prior to the pandemic, they had the outlet of going to work, going to school, but now they were forced. Incomes were reduced because people were out of work. And we know that financially, when people are upset, they often take it out on their partners as well. We saw access to resources being impacted as well. We saw like period poverty be on the rise, or people not being able to afford menstrual products during the pandemic. So the pandemic was very lethal for a lot of people experiencing intimate partner violence, the rates of people who were murdered like increased significantly during the pandemic.
Our guests are Christine Brunson and Pat Albright. They, as you can tell, are tireless advocates for women in general, but certainly in the area of domestic violence. As I mentioned, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So let me ask you, we get down to the nitty gritty here now. The situation becomes intolerable and dangerous. What's the first thing you would advise someone in that situation to do? Who do they call? What do they do? Christine?
I think it depends on where the person is in their journey. And so some people, the first person they call is a trusted loved one to share that, hey, like I am sick and tired of being sick and tired and I need support. Other people, the first person that they call sometimes is the police. However, we know that the police are oversaturated with calls, and our court systems are often oversaturated with the protection from abuse order law as well. And so, we often talk to people about where they are in their journey. It's important to note that statistics show that one of the most lethal time for a person in an intimate partner violence relationship is when they decide to leave. And so it's important for us to educate people on like what resources are available, as well as create what's called a safety plan as well, because basically you're going to be uprooting your whole entire life when you leave this partner. And so it's important to be intentional and strategic. And so does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely does. Again, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just leave is the most grossly oversimplified comment ever, because you're right. You need a plan. This is not so much I'm leaving in a huff. This is an escape. This is, and you better know where you're going and know what the circumstances are. Pat, Christine mentioned the police, and we know that is a tough job, and their spread is thin and possible in most big cities. But at the end of the day, is a police officer, I understand the need to call them very often, but are they the best people to respond to a situation? First responders. Isn't there a better way to have different people arrive at a scene like that?
I should hope so, and Christine would know more about that from her experience. But it kind of ties into something I wanted to bring out, which is that an example of how the state values or does not value women's safety and lives is in terms of rapes. So recently saw a figure that less than 1% of rapes lead to felony convictions. And at least, of course, 89% of the victims suffer emotional and physical consequences. But this is an example of how little our lives are valued in this by the system. And certainly that with the police, I think a lot of us would be scared to call the police, but sometimes you don't know what else to do.
Can I jump into? I think it should be in conjunction. So, like I said in my bio, I work as a case management coordinator, and more often than not, the push is to like when the police are called for a 302, that there is a mental health provider that accompanies the police. Yep. And so, I strongly believe that there needs to be someone who's trauma informed, and that police officers need to become more and more trauma informed. But I agree that there needs to, for safety reasons, there needs to be a police officer, and for safety reasons, there needs to be a trauma informed provider there as well to assess the situation and to provide support during the situation, because
I think coming
out is re-traumatizing as well.
Absolutely, and I think it also my perspective from the outside of this would be it also kind of dulls the police response to the situation. They see it so often. These two people are fighting and he's hitting her. It's sort of it becomes ordinary for them. And they certainly can't capable of seeing beyond that. I mean, what else needs to be done? If I don't know how you guys feel, but if I ever saw a situation where they, as you say, Christine, mandated a mental health caseworker or something to go with police on calls like this, it could be very, very valuable. Let me ask you with regard to collateral damage from this. in addition to the principles involved in a domestic violence situation, it must be a very, very traumatic situation for children, correct?
Yes.
And when Pat, when you talk about that the group Give Us Back Our Children, on the one hand, I think most people could go, well, look, this is a scary situation. There's physical violence potentially going on. First thought is to get the children out of harm's way. How is that being done wrong in your mind?
Well, it completely ignores the critical bond between mothers and their children. So to be ripped apart from your mom and put in with strangers is going to be terribly traumatic. Why not take the time, energy, and money to get the mother and the kids out of that situation, and instead of like ripping the children away from their mom and their anyway. So that's our concern, that we need to prioritize the mother and children staying together with the support that's needed for them to do that.
So your position is, the position of the group is that, yeah, there's a dangerous situation. Everybody needs to be put out of harm's way, but tearing children apart from their mothers only exacerbates the trauma. So
Right.
Keeping them together is what's important.
Exactly. Yeah.
For a lot of survivors, they say that's what helped them survive, and what's gave them the strength is their children.
Mhm.
And so I agree 100% with Pat, is like providing services for both the mom and the children, and informing them and educating them. Yeah.
And that whole process, you can see how a domestic violence situation not handled properly the way you guys wish it were and are helping happen, there's a gigantic ripple effect, because those kids are going to grow up in not the best environment. The likelihood that they're not going to become great citizens, or perhaps domestic violent partners themselves, just grows because of how screwed up we handle it now very often. Let me ask you just this final question about the dynamic of this, because I'm learning this as I go along. Do we see generational domestic violence actors? Do you know what I mean? Do children learn this? Christine, you're nodding your head. Do children learn this behavior from their parents?
I wouldn't go as far as saying children learn it from their behavior. When you said generational, I immediately thought of my family and my situation. So my grandmother experienced domestic violence, my mom experienced domestic violence, and so I saw it happening in my family. I wouldn't go as far as to say like, hey, because this happened, but I think that there are some factors that contribute to domestic violence and intimate partner violence. I think that there are a lot of environmental factors that impact. I think a lot of the ways that we raise people in our community and contribute. I think that access to mental health impacts. I think that there are a lot of societal impacts and environmental impacts that impact intimate partner violence.
Ladies, thanks so much for joining us. It's a huge topic, and we've just scratched the surface here now. If someone wants to get involved, Pat, what should they do? Who should they call?
Oh, okay. Well, people would be glad to get calls or emails to the Crossroads Women's Center, and our number is 215-848-1120. And the email is Philly at allwomencount.net. And I don't know if there's time for me to get into this, but there's some practical ways that people can get involved, such as fighting to get the child tax credit continued, that we've been very much involved in, because that's it made a huge difference in reducing poverty, and we want it extended without any cuts, without any work requirements, with fully refundable, so you don't have to have to file taxes to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Be on top of benefits without cutting those benefits, and it should go directly to the mother or primary caregiver, as a family allowance does in Europe. And the U.S. is one of the only countries, the only industrialized country that doesn't provide some kind of family allowance. So that's a practical thing, as well as fighting for increases in welfare benefits in Pennsylvania, TANF benefits for mothers with children, has not been increased benefit level since 1990, and a mother with 2 kids gets $403 a month. I mean, this is completely outrageous.
Yeah, we're only a couple of weeks away from elections, so we remind you endlessly that there are consequences to not voting. So vote.
That's
It
right.
matters. And thank you. Thanks for bringing up some of those bills. Yeah, it's a scandal. It's a scandal how little we do. Christine, if people want to know more about Purple House, we'll put the website up. But what would you like to see them do?
We have a community event on October the 29th from 12 to 4. It's called My Purple Path. It's an awareness walk / resource fair. It'll start at 20th and Tioga, and we'll walk from 20th and Tioga to Broad and Huntington Park. At Broad and Huntington Park, we will have musical performance as well as women who have been impacted by intimate partner violence and incarceration. We're raising awareness about the intersect of incarceration and domestic violence. We'll have all kinds of social service vendors there, as well as local businesses that are vending as well. So that's October the 29th. You can support us by coming to that and learning more about Purple House Project. Also, just following us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, Purple House Project PA. There we share our different initiatives and upcoming community events.
Terrific.
And
Christine?
I completely forgot to announce that we have an open house at our center.
When?
November 4th. It's a Friday afternoon from 1 to 4 at 5013 Wayne Avenue. So the new building we're moving into that is between Manheim and Seymour. And we're just reintroducing ourselves to the community, having done a lot of renovations and just finishing that up. So that's on November 4th. So hope people will join us for that as well.
We'll make a point of putting that information up when we post this interview. Christine Brunson, thanks, and Pat Albright for your work, obviously, and for joining us. I'd love to have you back. I know that you're going to be great resources, certainly for the community, but for this program. I appreciate your time and your work very much. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
And thank you all as well. Don't forget, we always like to push that subscription button. That's how you'll get the Behavioral Corner delivered to you. What could be more convenient? Like us and all, follow us and all that stuff too. Okay? Appreciate it. Steve Martirano, take care. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.